Hello everyone. Can anyone say no for a movie? Of course, no. Everyone loves a movie. Same goes for play. Because play lays the foundation for a movie. In this video, we are going to look into the play titled BHOMA by Badal Sircar. So before we start analyzing the play, let's look about the hands that drafted this play. It is impossible to discuss the history of modern Indian theatre and not encounter the name of Badal Sircar, said by Mitra. Quite interesting, right? Let's dig further about Badal Sircar to know what made Mitra say these lines about him. Wow, I guess Badal Sircar himself has something to say about his theatrical personality. Let's look what is it. I wrote plays to perform them. I'm a theatre person, that's all. This makes some sense because Badal Sircar did not write plays for his reading audience. Instead, he made plays for his visual audience to perform it. Badal Sircar, 11 July 1925 to 13 May 2011. He was a first-generation Bengali playwright and he belonged to post-independence era. Basically, Badal Sircar was an engineer by profession and he worked in India, Nigeria and many other places. But from his childhood, he had a deep desire for theatres. Though he became as a professional engineer, he didn't let go his dream or his passion for theatres. First, he started his debut as an actor in a proscenium theatre, but he rejected the theatre due to the British influence on the theatre. Because he did not like British influence on theatres, instead he wanted theatres to show people in their indigenous languages and indigenous culture. Further on, he started writing sociological plays and he continued with comedies and he directed dramas. Then gradually he became a playwright. According to Badal Sircar, there is no difference between his role as a playwright or a director or actor. According to him, all he wanted was to be a theatrical person and everything that was around theatre like playwright or whatever it was concerned with theatre, then he was satisfied with it. Badal Sircar was not satisfied with the conventional theatres or these proscenium theatres. He hated everything. So he made many experiments to find a new theatrical form. He did these experiments with his theatrical environment like stage, costume and presentation and everything, and he laid the foundation for third theatre. In 1967, he established a proscenium theatre company called Shatabdi, and he transformed this theatre company into a third theatre group after founding this third theatre. So, he was an influential exponent of third theatre. In his path as a playwright, in 1963, there was a path-breaking play titled Evam Indrajit. So this play brought about a great change in Badal Sircar's journey as a playwright. So this is all we knew about Badal Sircar.
Badal Sircar, the epitome of third theatre. Badal Sircar's dissatisfaction with the first theatre, that is Indian conventional folk theatre, second theatre, urban and the proscenium theatre, led him to form his own new theatre, and that he called it as the third theatre. These were the issues of proscenium theatre that he had problems with. Number 1. Conventional proscenium theatre's over-dependence on expensive paraphernalia which has no relevance in the theatre. Number 2. As theatre is a live show, as in theatre, live person communicates directly to another live person. This is a fundamental characteristic of the theatre which makes theatre differ from the other art forms. Number 3. According to him, sets, props and costumes are used to create an illusion of reality, but spectators have come to the theatre ready to use their imagination and they are prepared to accept the stage as a stage. Number 4. The bright lighting that blanks out audiences where audience-actor interaction is impossible because it separates performers and audience. Number 5. The sitting arrangement made in proscenium theatre, that is raised stages. The stage facing sitting arranged according to the ticket prices. Badal Sircar has changed the definition of Indian theatre as he established a third theatre in India. Sircar brought new ideas and methods to Indian theatre from the West and constructed this third theatre coined by Baba to describe Odin theatrate. Odin Theatrate was the epitome model and it's a small theatre society with diverse social and political ideas. It was also referred to as small theatre or third theatre. The third theatre saw itself as a cultural institution trying to refine training and performance methods but is perceived as avant-garde by many. Sircar was also inspired by Polish theatre practitioner Jesse Grotowski's The Poor Theatre, who considered an actor's body as a primary element in a theatre performance. Poor theatre rejects the use of excess in theatre, which includes lavish mise-en-scene, costumes, etc. In the proscenium theatre, elaborate stage setups, props, spotlight, costume, makeup, etc. are used to create the illusion of reality. But in the third theatre, emphasis is given on the performer's body rather than set, props and costumes. The focus of the performance becomes the actor's body, which performs with minimalistic props. The process became simplistic and was performed in any space, thereby rejecting traditional theatre halls or spaces. Shatabdi first moved off the elevated platform to perform in rooms. This was alternatively called intimate theatre or Angan Manch. An angan being an indoor courtyard, a decidedly intimate space in community life, and manch meaning stage. Folk theatre was still busy with only the folk forms, and the second theatre was engaged with the production of an urban life, which was the minor population. Therefore, Badal Sircar believed a true theatre of the people, therefore, would have to go where the majority of the population lives. So, Shatabdi took Sircar's place to Calcutta's Surendranath Park to involve the audience, and his plays also took place in rural areas, paddy fields, outside industries and factories. It is through his form, third theatre, Sircar makes the society, especially the middle class, and feels guilty for being indifferent towards man and his problems. The chief characteristics of Sircar's plays are choice of the middle class people as characters in the drama, revelation of the hidden social and moral evils, an attempt to remove the complicancy of the people, and a change in the dramatic technique. Badal Sircar has also portrayed a realistic picture of contemporary society. The problems of population, growth, unemployment, poverty, and child labor are presented dramatically. Along with Spartacus, Sircar's later plays Procession 1972, BHOMA 1974, Stale News 1980 are based on the concepts of third theatre. The third theatre was a theatre which had taken its foundation from both the first and the second theatre, but with its own unique style. He made his dramas or plays as live performance. His scripts were performative scripts and hence very dynamic, multifaceted, multidimensional, multi-layered instead of rigid or limited and confined. The characters in his plays are not individually used at all. They can be seen as what Sircar himself has said, I can be taken as a prototype of a particular class in a society at a particular period. Theatre of Badal Sircar was described by Rustam Barucha as the most rigorously non-commercial political theatre in India. The three major features of Sircar's third theatre were its free of cost, portability and flexibility. Sircar never charged for the performances. Only at the end of each performance, the group was requesting for charity and generous contributions by the spectators. The charity used to be the income source for planning the next performance. Badal Sircar never used props or any other costly material for the performances. His plays touched the inner self and emotions of the audience. So now we are moving to the play BHOMA. Badal Sircar, as a playwright through his third theatre, produced the plays in his mother tongue Bangla only. He felt that the English language cannot convey his objectives to the masses exactly as he wanted. Later, his almost plays got translated worldwide. His play BHOMA was originally written in 1974, but it was translated into English by Samik Bandyobadaye in 1983. BHOMA is a dramatization of a life of the oppressed peasant in Indian rural society. It presents a social and economical exploitation through a series of scenes. Badal Sircar does not seem to aim at entertaining the audience through BHOMA. The play underlines the untold pains and pangs of subaltern classes. In BHOMA, Sircar has adopted a strange and new technique. Dramatic structure, concept, and composition of the play is also innovative. BHOMA is a play written by Sircar for over 3 years. The readers cannot find a definite story, continuity, plot, or character in the play. There are no protagonists in his play, BHOMA. There are only prototypes. Badal Sircar has attempted to portray the poor life of the farmers in the rural Indian society through 6 actors belonging to the middle class. They are not given any proper names, rather as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Though they do not identify themselves with BHOMA, they are efficient enough to act out the feelings and the lives of the desolated and exploited peasants. Sircar has associated various connotations with BHOMA. For example, in this play, as one says, BHOMA is the forest, BHOMA is the paddy field, BHOMA is the village. BHOMA is an aboriginal barbarian woodcutter. He is a mysterious figure like Beckett's Godot. BHOMA is a peasant who creates. He is a cornfield, paddy field, and he produces food for those in cities. Thus, BHOMA may refer to Sundarbans, poor people, forest dwellers, peasants, and subalterns. It can be illustrated with one of the quotes in this play. One says, if the BHOMAs had rice, we would not have anything left to eat. BHOMA's blood, red blood, blossoms into white jasmines of rice on our plates, twice every day. This play seems to belong to the theatre of absurd. Sircar has written different scenes which are not interconnected. He has seen the sufferings of peasants in a village called Rangabelia in Sundarban district. The impacts created by his own personal experiences in Rangabelia were written down as scenes in it and has strung those together and created the play BHOMA.
Badal Sircar is one of the influential Bengali dramatists of the 21st century. He was born in Calcutta and most of his plays revolve around Calcutta. In most of his plays, he has recorded the turbulent period of Calcutta in 1960s. Sircar used the real space Calcutta, the existing city, rather than the fictional space. Calcutta is considered to be one of the largest cities in India. Even though the city seems to be economically well developed, most of the people suffer from poverty and overcrowding. Sircar's letter to Richard Schechter, the founder of performance studies, describes the city of alien culture. He also opines that Calcutta is a city both most loved and hated intensely. Like the Indians, the entire world considers and worships the land as their motherland. Susan Basnett's Comparative Literature, a critical introduction, discusses that any violation of land would be considered as spoiling the women's virginity. Basnett says, other colonizers expressed their journeys in terms of land cultivation, planting and fertilizing, hoeing, tilling, ploughing the land, and recently scholars have begun to point out the equation of this kind of imagery with that of rape. The land has been considered as the flesh and blood of people because of its nourishments. Indians, especially the tribes, worship the 5 elements of nature, that is, air, water, land, space, and fire, as their god. These kinds of nature's nurture and worships could be destroyed both by geological hazards as well as man-made disasters. Compared to man-made disasters, it is the nature's violence against people is more vibrant. The aim of the play BHOMA, first produced in the year 1976, is to communicate what is happening in the villages at the grassroots levels, the nature of exploitation, both industrial and agricultural, the urban stranglehold on the rural economy. BHOMA is a character in the play who represents the condition of the subaltern people. BHOMA is one such play which depicts the predicament of people in suburbans as well as Sundarban space in West Bengal. The critics and scholars agree that Sundarbans is a place which recorded most of geological hazards and also suggested that it would be terrible to lead a peaceful life. Though Sundarbans is considered one of the most celebrated and second largest mangrove forest in the world, it has some pessimistic aspects also.
Sircar's BHOMA gives a glimpse of the darker side of the Sundarbans by recording its ecological destruction against people. Many scholars and writers witnessed and recorded Sundarbans' geographical and ecological destruction in their works. Most of the people do not have regular jobs and some of them work as part-time workers. Such workers are woodcutters, palm collectors, fishermen, and honey hunters. Some people collect timber for boats, woods for fire, poles for house, grass for matting, and reeds for fencing. The inhabitants of the land struggle hard for their survival and migrated to nearby villages. BHOMA's family is one such family migrated to nearby villages. By seeing BHOMA's migration, other farmers in Sundarbans migrated and struggled hard for their survival. Though BHOMA seems to be one of the exploited farmers, he represents the suffering of all the marginalized farmers in his village. Their exploitation is both external as well as internal. The internal wounds of the farmer are the most when compared to the externals. The external exploitation of the farmer is the physical wounds when they are brutally attacked by the wild animals. BHOMA and his family works in the forest for daily wages, and his family is not an exception from the hungry mouth of wild animals. They are also attacked and suffered by animals. BHOMA's family and other villages suffer not only from the attack of wild animals but also by the numerous unnamed diseases. BHOMA's mother died of snake bite. His father was dragged away by a crocodile before his very eyes. The younger brother couldn't stand the tamarind and salt water mixture and died of diarrhea. BHOMA's mother died and her whole body turns into blue because of the snake's venom. The crocodile ate the chunks of flesh from his father's body and made him mutilated. BHOMA says that his father's blood flows around him like a red river. The BHOMA's brother, who works in the salt water, has turned black in color. BHOMA, the protagonist of the play, is himself too seriously attacked by the tiger. The people of Sundarbans say that tiger attacks BHOMA's right eye and made him blind. The vengeance within BHOMA made him to attack the tiger. He killed the tiger with his rusty axe, which killed hundreds of villages before his eyes. Despite all his miseries, it is BHOMA who has the responsibility to look after the dying and mutilated family members. Above all, he has worked hard to fill his mouth and also paid his family debts. He and his brother both are considered as the true breadwinners of their family. It is melancholic to know that they both strike a clock only for 6 rupees per day. Learning all the difficulties, most of the Sundarbans villages moved as refugees to the nearby villages. Such villages are Sealda, Tapsia, Pediadang, Dapa, and Kusum Kumari. BHOMA's brother is one such person who migrated to the next village in Sundarbans. The rest of the family members, BHOMA's mother, wife, daughter, and sister, serve in the house of janitry. They seem to be washing the pots and pans in their master's household. They become worse than the servants in the family because there are masters who made them as concubines. BHOMA's mother and sisters carry their master's child in their wombs, carrying in their wombs the children of janitry. Though BHOMA's family serve as real breadwinners, the whole family income could not feed the mouth of all. BHOMA seems to be hungry all the time and wishes to eat rice. It is well to quote Marx's views that rich become richer and the poor becomes poorer. The landlords are like huge blood-sucking bugs sitting at the top of every farmer's head to suck their blood. To erase and counter such differences, BHOMA has now become more vibrant and violent now. He takes his rusty axe to revolutionize the weeds, rich landlords in the society. Learning all the revolutionary aspects of BHOMA, his co-farmers shares the fact about BHOMA the sacrificer. There are some words as blood and gold which are symbolically quite significant used in Sircar's play BHOMA. Stylistically analyzing at the lexicosemantic level, the words blood and gold have the great connotative meaning signifying the sacrifice of BHOMA and the indifference of human beings towards BHOMA's sacrifice, respectively. They say that BHOMA worked for the welfare of all the exploited farmers. The farmers with the deepest concern toward BHOMA say that it is he who withstands and gives his life and blood for the survival of the village community. Though he gives his life and blood for the other's survival, there is no one to look after him. He is in the deathbed and blood drips from his mouth. While discussing about his sacrifices and his condition, soon his co-farmers become lifeless and their blood becomes cold and inert. It might be interpreted as the force of hierarchy which made them to never raise their heads in the protest. Though both he and his co-farmers struggle hard to erase class or caste distinctions, there is no change in the hierarchical values. Sircar has used many images and symbols to depict nature's violence against man, as well as the man violence hierarchy against his fellow beings. He has referred hierarchical powers as poisonous weeds of the society. Even though BHOMA tries to remove such poisonous weeds, they are growing and growing at the height of mountain peaks without His farmers cry loudly and encourage Boma's senses and say that he is alive to care for the farmers. They proudly say Boma has risen to attack all the evils in the society and they are within the heart of Boma. Through the play, Sircar highlights the predicament of farmers and also encourages them to participate in the revolution. He says people are the heroes by themselves and they have to carry and protect themselves from all the anti-social elements. In this play, Boma serves as a metaphor and represents farmers' exploitation on the whole. As a king who takes care of his countrymen, cares for the suppression of his co-farmers in the hands of the landlords as well as from the ecological desolation. Boma is a dramatization of a life of the oppressed peasant in Indian rural society. It represents its social and economic exploitation through a series of scenes. A conscientious playwright not only represents the gravity of the problem but also offers a solution by employing powerful symbols and images. The society, full of opportunists and exploiters, is represented as a forest of poisonous trees and Boma, an aboriginal barbarian, as a woodcutter. Boma is an archetype of the oppressed, exploited peasant who finally takes up his rusty axe, grinds and sharpens it to cut the poisonous trees that grow around him. Sircar's Boma also shares this view of making an egalitarian society which is free from all antisocial evils. One says, this earth belongs to all of us, doesn't it, Boma? If we all of us could work our hardest to make everything we need and then all of us shared all we produced. Boma depicts the trauma of the living space Sundarbans.
And now let us see how Badal Sircar's BHOMA talks about the exploitation of subaltern classes. In BHOMA, Badal Sircar addresses the issues of peasants and rural class. The play has just 6 characters who all represent the subordination and the exploitation of peasants and rural class in the name of power. The play is very significant because it speaks on the struggle of a common man. The sufferings of the rural man is not entertained by the bureaucracy. Badal Sircar represents the exploitation of the subaltern class through the character of a stenographer who represents the pains and agonies of a lower class man. He works in a company called the Samson and the Blackbird, who has only the salary of about 455 rupees. He is in dire need of loan about 20,000 rupees from a bank. The manager asks so many questions in order to check his loan liabilities. The stenographer tries hard to satisfy the bank manager by his wise answer, but he is not granted his loan at the end. And it is only because he is from the lower class and he does not have any liabilities. He becomes a victim of his own class. He is subordinated due to his societal position. But on the other hand, the bank manager immediately grants the loan to another character called Mr. Mukherjee simply because he is from the upper class and he can provide collateral damage easily. BHOMA also reveals the subordination of peasants. Villages in Rangabelia are exploited. Badal Sircar points out the truly widened gap between the urban areas and the rural areas. The peasants who live in Rangabelia have very little land for farming. The village has no proper road, no facility of doctor, and the electricity has not yet reached there. On the other hand, India has just successfully sent its first artificial satellite Aryabhatta into the orbit, and metro rail will soon find its way into the city of Calcutta. Badal Sircar cries for the subaltern classes, for those who have been waiting generations after generations for electricity, transportation system and a better road. Peasants cultivate kharif crop, which is totally dependent on the rain. They yield wheat and paddy once in a year, but due to the lack of water and electricity, they could not cultivate the land, whereas Kolkata is going to get a new and a second bridge within the city. The farmers actually produce gold, but they are treated like beggars. Even they haven't got any support from the bank. They live under immense pressure. They thought constantly about the interest of the banks. Having toiled the whole year, they still live in poverty. They long for help, but they are not given a helping hand. Badal Sircar feels very sympathetic towards the farmer's subordination, and his ideas and his voice has found its way into this play. Badal Sircar praises exploitation of the lower class by the upper class through the character of Gadai Minter, who is a landlord, and he usually provides his rustum pumps on 7 rupees per hour to the farmers in Rangabelia. He dominates the poor farmers in the name of power. Farmers struggle to maintain his interest and he exploits them just as same as the bank does. He behaves like a monster with the farmers and he is corrupted by power, but he still gets easily loans from the bank. This theme of the struggle of subaltern classes also seamlessly transits into another theme of the post-colonial aspects of this play. Post-colonialism cannot only be defined as the continuation of colonialism, but it is a revolt against colonial practices and the rejection of Eurocentric norms of literary and artistic values. It gives a critical analysis of the history, culture, literature, and modes of discourse of the former colonies of England, Spain, France, and other European imperial powers. Postcolonialism rejects Western imperialization as a master narrative which considers the colonial other as subordinated and marginalized. The aim of the play BHOMA, which was first produced in 1976, is to communicate what is happening in the villages at the grassroots levels, the nature of exploitation, both industrial and agriculture, the urban stranglehold on the rural economy. BHOMA is a character in the play who represents the conditions of the subaltern people. Sircar had heard the story of BHOMA from Tushar Kanjilal, the headmaster of the Rangabelia village school, who has inspired Sircar to write this play. But BHOMA's story is directly not within this play. Seeing, feeling, learning about our surroundings shock us, hurt us, anger us. These have come out in disjointed and dramatic pictures within the play. BHOMA's picture was not then a part of those pieces. But when those pieces were strung together into the play, then somehow it was BHOMA's image which started to become the link, and at the end of the play could not be called anything but BHOMA. BHOMA interprets the exploitation of subaltern classes by representing the nature of commercialization of agriculture and by the introduction of the group of moneylenders during British rule. Subaltern is a group of society which does not have access to power, and Sircar was the champion of this poor class. Theorizing about positioning of the subaltern, particularly in relation to history, is central to post-colonial theories, has said Abraham. Subaltern means one who belongs to the inferior and subordinate groups. Antonio Gramsci, in his prison notebook, includes in subaltern groups the peasants, workers, women, and other groups who were outside the structures of political organizations. According to the Gramsci, as mentioned in post-colonial studies, the key concepts. He quotes, "The history of subaltern social groups is necessarily fragmented and episodic, since they are always subject to the activity of ruling groups even when they rebel. Clearly, they have less access to the means by which they may control their own representation and less access to cultural and social institutions. Evils of materialism, sufferings of the common man due to his I-centered lifestyle, and the decline of spiritual values are all discussed in this play. The exploitation of poor, proletariat group was not limited to the colonial rule only, it exists in the independent India too. Sircar says, having been a colonial country for so long, the cities of India have acquired a colonial character in their development, sometimes even in their birth, like in the case of Calcutta, Bombay, Madras, and New Delhi. Such cities did not emerge as the natural products of indigenous economic development of the country, but were created primarily to serve the colonial interests of the foreign power. It is this reason that the government is ready to spend millions and millions of rupees for the development of cities, but it does not have enough amounts for the welfare of peasants. It is another recurrent theme raised by this playwright. In Sircar's view, even after the accomplishment of independence, people are still the slaves of that colonial servitude mentality. They find themselves unable to free from the mentality because 300 years of colonial rule has cut them off from their thousands of years of civilization and customs. People of India feel privileged to carry on the cultural trends of colonizers. The colonized subaltern people are dependent upon the Western intellectuals to speak for them. They can neither speak for themselves nor fight for their rights because they are subordinate conditions and inaccessibility to power. In this way, the play is a sharp reaction against the slave mentality of the Indians, which is a repercussion of colonialism.